In our pursuit for understanding a little bit more about privacy and taking better control into our hands, Mozilla found themselves in a very deep controversy, and I want to attempt to explain both sides and then give my thoughts, views, and opinions. Are we ready to talk about Mozilla PPA? No, this is not installing new software. This is a new means of them collecting data and handing it willingly over to advertisers. Welcome back to Switch to Linux. If you like this type of content that teaches us about computers and privacy and maybe why we might want to take some extra controls and steps in our own lives, this might be the channel for you. So go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so. Check to make sure you are still subscribed if you think you might be. Leave us a like and a comment down below. And today we are going to be talking about this Mozilla PPA, which is a form of data collection. So we'll go ahead and address it from the different viewpoints, and then I have some thoughts of my own about it. So I first saw this on from It's FOSS News. Firefox has a new controversial feature. Is it a problem? And the reason we address it in such a question is there are elements of this that are very positive. There are elements that cause me grave concern. The idea here is that if data collection is going to happen anyway, let's jump ahead of it. Let's collect certain amounts of data and then anonymously hand the data over to validate how advertising is going. Firefox has said our biggest problem is that we have released this onto the people without a lot of communication. So if you are running Firefox version 128, check that now, you have been opted in to handing this data up to a network which is collecting data for advertising companies. Yes, the company that has stood so long against any form of data collection is now willingly and opted you in to collecting the data and giving you a toggle button by which you can go back and unsubscribe to that. But let's go ahead and address the issue. I'm going to just briefly go under the It's FOSS News because this was the introduction. I want to give them a little bit of recognition, and I'll include the link for these guys down in the show notes as well as the other two sources we're going to go to. So what this has to do with is the fact that now they have added this new feature. It's called Website Advertising Preferences. This is brand new in 128, and it is just added in, and it is checked, which says it's going to collect information, anonymize it, and hand it over to the website advertisers for the verification that the advertisements that people are seeing are actually valid. Now, when we get into this, immediately you might jump out and say, oh my Lord, that's so super bad. Well, it may not be as bad. Remember, there's a couple ways of having privacy, and we do have to keep these in mind. Number one, don't send data. Number two, send so much data it can't be used. So of course, that is one of the problems that big three-letter agencies have, where they collect so much data. Every analyst has come out and said, it's just too much data. We can't do anything with it. In this case, it sends so much data that it's hard to de-anonymize things. However, there are some serious issues I have with the players involved. So what is this? This is a pool which is being used as a third party. So it's not like Firefox gives the information directly to the advertisers. They give it to the third party, and then the third party collects the data and hands it over to them. In fact, if you remember going back to look at Google's Flock model that they were trying to do, which was shut down for being horrendous, this is actually the exact same thing. It's just instead of Google getting the data, one third party gets the data first. And that raises some serious concerns. I forget what the Flock stood for. It was something collecting information on cohorts. The idea behind that was that all of this data is all collected, but then the data is not, what they do with it is they collect all the data together and then they target you based on the groups, not based on the actual person. Well, that's exactly what this system is trying to do. This is called the Distributed Aggregation Protocol, the DAP. And what they're trying to do is that third parties collecting the data, removing as much data as possible, and then sending this over to talk about the effectiveness. Effectively, what it is a how many people saw the ad and how many people clicked on the ad. And there's a little bit more, which we will get into in a moment. So on the two sides of the coin, some people are saying this is seriously bad and that it threw this system into your Firefox and opted you in to sending data back to this third party without telling anybody about it. On the other side of the coin, Bobby Hawley, the CTO, stepped in to clarify what is going on. He started with how the internet has become a massive cesspool of surveillance. He expanded on their approach with Firefox to ship a browser with anti-tracking features, but a couple limitations. One is that advertisers would try to bypass the countermeasures. This is kind of, in my opinion, this is kind of like telling kids, well, you're going to have sex anyway, have a condom. It's better to teach abstinence. And I'm not saying completely restricted. I mean, hey, even in my day as a kid, you go into the boys' bathroom for 50 cents, pick yourself up a balloon, you know? And that's the thing. We have to start on the side of let's have more responsibility, not, hey, let's just go ahead and walk amongst the wolves so that we can choose which one eats us. Really is the difference going on here. But I'm getting into too much into my opinion. Let's go ahead and get back to what they says here. Most users just accept the default options. So, and that Mozilla doesn't believe in a modal consent dialogues. They find such dialogues to be hostile, and I generally will agree with that. Now, here is why they opted in. They opted it in because this works best if more people are submitting information. So if everybody's submitting information, there's a lot more gray matter. It's harder to sift through, and it de-anonymizes you better. This is literally the Tails and the Tor model, particularly the Tails, the Tor bundle, Mulvad browser. These work by making everybody using the system look identical to one another. So it becomes very difficult. You can go back if you remember the scene from, it was the first Batman Begins, I think. And you remember he's going in and doing his ninja training, and he gets cut on the side. So what does he do to blend in? He goes through the crowd and starts cutting other ninjas in the exact same spot so that he can better blend in with the crowd. This model can work and does work, in which case this is, again, the model that Tails uses. This is, again, the model that Tor browser uses. This is the model that Mulvad browser uses. Make everybody look identical. You can't figure out who is who. You can't chase around the target if he looks like every other thing in the room. This is where the anonymous mask showed up. Everyone wears the exact same mask. You don't know who is who. Like, he's wearing a mask. What kind of mask? I don't know. It's a mask that 100 other people out here are wearing. It makes it very difficult to figure out who's who. Whereas if you all go with your own masks and they showed up, it was the guy with the Batman mask versus the Guy Fawkes versus the Spider-Man mask, you want to have everything look the same. That's why Mozilla opted it in, because the more people submitting the data, the better it becomes at hiding the individual users. Now, there is a post here from Andrew Moore, which is an excellent post. I'm going to link this down below as well. I encourage you to go read what he has to say. And what his concern is there's misconceptions about the people that probably are going to land more on my side and say, hey, we need to sit down and completely ban all of this tracking. And he says, well, hold on, let's hear them out. And this is really where it is a good approach. The more people that are handing this data over, the better. So let me just summarize a couple of the key points. Of course, this is Firefox 20. Let's go ahead and read the TLDR of it, and then we'll go through some specific things. The PPA initiative, of course, us in Linux, we hear PPA, and it's like an Ubuntu repository model. So we're all getting all confused over here in Linux. But that being said, Mozilla's PPA initiatives shift metrics and tracking away from tracking you as an individual towards tracking the ad campaign in a personal, privacy-preserving way. Those metrics are collected to ensure individual privacy and enables advertisers to measure the success of the campaign without having to track you. As somebody who really values personal privacy and despises advertising and tracking, I will be keeping the PPA enabled in my browser as it reduces the incentives from ad tech companies to track in an invasive way. It also simplifies my blocking of telemetry, as I only have the DAP service endpoints to block. So there is certainly something to be said about that. Now he goes in, of course, he hates advertising blocker. His blocker is very much like my personal firewall. He's using PF Blocker NG. He's using uBlock Origin. I do both of these things as well. And he's talking about why do people start tracking is the measure effect of this. And really, and this is, I think, where we have a divergence of opinion. I personally don't want there to be any specific tracking because their whole model is I'm going to figure out everything about you. So now I can throw things at you that I think you want to see and that are going to compel you to buy. And then we're going to follow me around like some puppy that's constantly yapping and barking. And my intention with that, well, I'm not going to say what my intention of that is, but the fact of the matter is, if you follow me around the internet, I'm sorry, you're not an advertiser. You are a stalker. Stop stalking me. Stop stalking people in general. Because yes, this model of advertising can be profitable, but this is not the first model of advertising we had and not the first model of advertising that worked. When I first set up blogging and advertising on blogging years ago, everything was contextual. If I go to an ad about headphones, I see ads about headphones. It makes sense if I am on a web page reading about healthcare, show me an ad about healthcare. I'm obviously interested in healthcare. But to say I watched this article on healthcare and then follow me around on the next 15 websites showing me the same ad, AMSOIL tried that and I will never buy their products, ever. I don't care if it's the best oil company in the world. I will never buy AMSOIL because it was my first experience of some internet stalker following me around the world, not because I took any interest in AMSOIL at all, but because I had to log into their platform once for a client. And then all of a sudden, I'm just seeing AMSOIL ads everywhere, and I said, enough. I am never buying anything for that company. And that is what the advertisers don't recognize, is that they are oftentimes alienating people way too much. They do not understand that if you're going to constantly badger us and badger us and badger us, it may push just as many people away as it's helpful. Now, I also understand I am certainly a unique individual, and the average person, and I have seen it, the average people are just like, oh, I saw an ad, let's buy it. It's so cool. It's like, not necessarily. You need to show a little bit more initiative in examining things. That's where he gets into. So what their approach is let's go ahead and keep up this tracking rather than make a switch back to contextual ads. And that's the thing. Contextual ads are appropriate. Personal ads are not. Now, what they're trying to do is still have the ability to track people, just not personally, but you still can't make this work without de-anonymizing the data. So this is useless, in my opinion. But anyway, this is the details about how that works. So there is a option here, the privacy attribution impression, and it collects, is this just a view or is this a click? And then there's the number, the historical index for counting this. There is the ad, which is a string, the string for the ad itself, and then the target where the conversion will occur. So automatically it's collecting, did you view it or did you click it? And it's collecting information about the advertisement, not necessarily information about you. The problem is this data must be sent somewhere. And once the data is sent somewhere, this is where we can do fingerprinting, we can do IPing and things, and that's what the third party is supposed to help with. The question is, who is controlling the third party? The problem with Flock, and this is a very similar, it's not exactly what Flock was doing, it's very similar to Flock. The problem is that Flock was controlled by the advertiser itself, and that is in and of itself problematic. But we're going to find that same problem show up here a little bit later. The private attribute conversion options is the task. So the string. So this is basically the thing you want somebody to do. Do you want to click on it, go to the page, scroll all the way to the bottom? The size, the look back days, how many times has it been gone back? Is it the impression was just viewed or clicked? The number, the ad string, and the sources. this optionally lists the publisher site /origin that needs to match the impression. So this is where was the ad at. So now you know where the ad was at. You know if they viewed it or clicked it. You know the number. You know the string. You know how many times the person has looked back. And then you'll have another optional task in there. And so that is what they're trying to do, is just collect information relating to that. The challenge is we have to get all this stuff back to the main server. Now, there are a couple of these different servers that are being tested. One of these is Mozilla's. So here is they talk about only being a partial solution in interoperable private attribution and Mozilla's privacy preserving attribution API experiment. That is going to be a key word. We're going to get to that in a bit. The experiment are only a single piece of the puzzle towards eliminating the invasive individual tracking. We're going to come back to that word experiment. Keep that back in your mind. Other importance is to ensure legislation is in place to outlaw invasive tracking in the first place. I would agree with that. It's one of the few places I really would like to see more government involvement. Let's ban all of this personal collecting of data because A, I've not done business with this company. B, they can't reasonably secure it. This is clear from how many data leaks we are seeing. Now, why have it on? This is where it gets into that idea here. Quite frankly, because the privacy of each individual benefits from having a larger cohort in the aggregation. So if more people turn this off, it's not going to work as well. My argument is I don't care if it works as well. I don't want any tracking at all. And that, in my opinion, is the best thing. Here's how you do it. You put out your ad based on the context of what's around the page, and then you see if your ad is causing conversions. You don't need to tie this to an individual person, and you can. I have seen it. I have seen it where we're running Google Ads. We're driving people to the site, and if a person sees a Google ad, clicks it, and buys the final product from the site, I can de-anonymize everything. I can click back, and I can see the other sites that they went on. It's easy. Not difficult. Now, he does actually talk about a couple things. At this point in time, let's go ahead and have a brief look at the browser itself. So I don't actually have this version of Firefox on this machine because I hold back as many updates as I can. So I went ahead and I installed Firefox on this Arch virtual machine. So let me go ahead and pull down the About Firefox here. Now, mind you, I installed this. This had Firefox 127. I just upgraded it to 128, which is the version they added this. I did not see any notifications, changes, or any indication. If I just ran system updates and I didn't know it went from Firefox 127 to Firefox 128, I would not even know this feature is there. But you can see now we are at Firefox 128. What does this look like? Go into your settings, and I believe it might be on general, it might be on the privacy and security. I think this one's actually on privacy and security. So when you go down here, here is under privacy and security. Note the default that Firefox by default wants to send information to Mozilla, which I think is a violation of their code of data collection. But okay, whatever. That's always been there. Now, this one is interesting here. You remember that word experiment? This used to say experiments. Now it says studies. Allow Firefox to install and run studies. By default, they want to be able to do that. But many people, like this is a VM, so I didn't actually change this. In every one of my browsers and production computers, I always go in and turn this off. Actually, I turn off all of these. All right. So if I do that, of course, oh my Lord, look at this. You will no longer be allowing Mozilla to capture data. Good. I don't want Mozilla to capture data. They shouldn't be doing that anyway. Not by default. But I always turn this off, which means I do not want to participate in your studies. Again, keep that in the back of your mind. This is the other option down there. Now, notice that turning this off does turn this off. I have not checked. Actually, no, I did check because my Endeavor computer did recently upgrade to 128. I know that I have not allowed that turned on, yet this option was turned on in my production machine. Even though I had turned off this setting to tell Mozilla not to select data, in this update, they have turned this back on and they have turned this on. But if you do turn this off, it turns this off as well. All right, so there is that. So that is, in my opinion, a serious issue. Now, what he is saying here is if you go to About Config and you accept this, and then we go and we look at toolkit telemetry .dap helper and .dap leader. So let me go ahead and go over to those. So that is toolkit.telemetry, toolkit.telemetry.dap. Okay, so one of these is helper. So you see the helper and you see the leader. You see that these are the DAP services which are going back to Mozilla. If I were to come in here and just put these back, what he says in his article is use a loopback address. That means something that just fizzles. So if I go ahead and do that, this will be an update to your Firefox hardening guide. If you do not want any of these at all, then you can go ahead and block these, or you can just block those original 2 addresses in your web blockers, and that's going to block the data from going back as well. But that is ultimately what you would need to do that. So I actually pushed this already live on my production system to make sure I am not participating in this nonsense. Even though, yes, by default, the more people that use this, the better it is. I'm sorry, I'm just not going to be complicit in any form of data collection. Now, here is where everybody all agrees. He says it. I agree. Mozilla agrees. Their biggest problem is failure to communicate. Number one, I stopped reading the Firefox bulletin updates because there's so many of them. Since there's so many of them, and it's oftentimes minor things, I note to myself, I need to start watching these again very closely. I'll report on them if there's something fascinating, but I didn't know this was coming on until I found this article on It's FOSS, which led me over to Andrew's blog, and then we're going to have a look at what the CTO has to say here in a moment. I didn't know about this. Nobody knew about this. And they have literally just updated browsers, turned on sending data back to Mozilla, and turned on this feature if you had previously had sending such data off. They have turned it on in the last update. And that is their biggest failure. And then, of course, now here is where we're going to get some more interesting things here. This is from Reddit, of course, and this is actually the Firefox CTO, and this is his account, and he addresses something, and there's a few things that I want to point out in this article that tells me that when Firefox 129 comes out, they should completely remove this entirely, and I'm going to explain why at the end of this post. He says here there's been a lot of discussion over the trial for private attribution prototype in Firefox 128. Okay, let's stop right there for a brief moment. This is a trial. I read trial and I think test, experiment, study. So people who have explicitly opted out of receiving studies are now being hoisted into a study. You are changing their default options. You are turning on data collection back to Mozilla in a computer that long ago had that stuff turned off. And then you added a new function to collect my data without my consent, even if I had studies turned off. Mozilla, you need to do the right thing. Pull it out entirely in 129. Come out and publicly apologize for doing this nonsense because I have explicitly opted out of your studies long ago. This is a study. That's what they say. It is a trial for private attribution. It is a study. It is an experiment. Then I have opted out of your experiments, Firefox. Now, it's clear in retrospect, he says we should have communicated more in this one. I want to make a minute to explain our thinking and clarify a few things. So he posted down here on Reddit, and I really hope the first comment that I saw last night is the first comment I say here because it was exactly what I was thinking. So hopefully it's there, or I can find it. Internet has become massive surveillance. Yeah, we know about that. So in the absence of alternatives, there's an enormous economic incentives for advertisers to bypass the countermeasures, leading to a perpetual arms race that we may not win. Second, this approach only helps people that choose to use Firefox, and we want to improve privacy for everyone. So they're testing this out in such a way that they are trying it out to possibly push in other directions. All right, whatever opinion you may have of the advertising as an economic model, it's a powerful industry that's not going to pack up and go away. A mechanism for advertisers to accomplish their goals in a way that did not entail gathering a bunch of personal data would be a profound improvement to how the internet we have today. I'm going to point out this is incorrect. If you read my book, I am not amused. I address how the music industry and the movie industry prevented government regulation, that is by regulating themselves. Because if they didn't regulate themselves a little bit, the government was about to stand up. And that's, I think, what we need. As much as I'm not a fan of big government, if they're not going to get under control, they're not going to regulate themselves, then the government does need to step in and say, all right, you know what? No more collecting private data. Figure it out otherwise. Now, they can figure out how to do it themselves. And some are trying and some of them aren't. Of course, Firefox did recently buy an ad agency. We reported on that, I think, briefly in the Weekly News Roundup last week. But the other biggest concern I have is who they are working with in this situation. And they are working with Meta. The devil's in the details, and not everything that claims to be privacy preserving actually is. We published extensive analysis of how certain other proposals in this vein came up short, but rather than just taking shots, we're also trying to design a system that actually meets the bar. We've been collaborating with Meta on this because any successful mechanism will need to actually be useful to advertisers, and designing something Mozilla and Meta are simultaneously happy with is a good indicator we've hit the mark. I'm sorry, if Meta is involved, it's probably a good indicator we are not hitting the mark. We're not even shooting at the same target if we are talking about privacy, because Meta is not a privacy respecting company. In fact, Meta is the antithesis of a privacy respecting company. So I'm sorry, if you want to deal with something like this, you're not going to be doing it in alignment with Meta. Now, where Meta might have something positive is they may see some of the writing on the wall and say, yeah, we got to do something a little bit different. But again, that gets back to self-regulation. But at this time, I do not have enough trust capital with Meta in order to actually trust that they and Mozilla are going to work together in something that is collecting my data without me opting into it and then sending it out to some other server. And I don't care who controls that server. That's why I think this should be completely removed. They should apologize, because this is an experiment, and many of us have opted out to receive experiments long ago. And I have. And then they turned on a bunch of things. Okay, so I think that this is, yes, this is the comment. I love this comment from Nakatanadinzio, I think. I hopefully I said that right. But you all know I can't pronounce anything. A problem that I think is a major one is you've given advertiser an inch, they take a mile. If this system is any way breakable, it will be broken. If a person can be bribed to de-anonymize the data, they will, and if they can't be, they will be replaced. We have to remember how we got here. What led to an arms race between users needing to arm themselves with ever-invasive advertising. The first cable networks were ad-free as you were paying for TV, and now they have to trim shows from the 90s to fit in more advertising, despite paying far more than people in the era of it being ad-free. I'm not sure what he means by ad-free specifically, because yes, they did have advertisements, but they weren't targeting specifically for you, and they were very predictable commercial breaks. I'm not sure exactly what he's getting at there, but we'll go ahead and accept his point for a moment. That's not the point that I thought was brilliant. Okay, internet ads used to be random JPEG banner of a product, then GIFs, Flash, and eventually enveloped into a point that ad blocking is recommended by the FBI and me, because there's more malware in advertisement than there is anything legitimate these days. In my personal and unscientific opinion, a lot of mental health issues people lay at the feet of social media and smartphones are actually caused by the volume and nature of advertising today. Advertising companies should be making ads more expensive and rare, not sending out more. Helping advertisers target users, even anonymously, helps degrade the human being that is trying to use the internet. They're looking for vulnerabilities in the psychology of people they target, and that's not something I believe in an ethical person or company should stand for. Okay. And this guy, Kevlar Unicorn, says this: I am tired of people constantly trying to sell me things. It's invasive. It's exhausting. My life should not be seen as a source of income. This guy says, the economic incentive is too strong for ethical advertisers to survive on a large scale. The only way to end the arms race is heavy regulation on advertising. If that's what they're lobbying for, I will be in full support. And then there's a lot more things. Again, I'm going to leave a comment to this thread down below. So my final thoughts on all of this. I agree with this guy. We have way too many ads. Now, I personally don't see a lot of ads. I watch movies that are on my own NAS system. I can watch my movies and TV content without being constantly bombarded by advertisements. I do run ad blockers, so I'm not getting those. I mean, hey guys, I don't have the money to buy your crap anyway. You don't need to perpetually advertise to me. I can't afford it anyway. You know what I mean? The things that I need or might be looking for, have a good company that I can find on the internet. And when I'm looking for one such service, yours may be the one I pop up. But I promise you this, if I'm looking for oil, I will tell you one company I will not be buying, and that is AMSOIL. Not going to happen. Never going to happen. If they're the last oil company in the world, I will stop driving before I will support anything that company does. I don't care how good they are. Because they played internet stalker and I got pissed off. And, I don't hold a grudge against people. Frankly, forgiveness is certainly an element of our life. But for a corporation, I'm sorry. Nope. Once you're on that list, you got to work really hard to get off of that list. That's why HP's on that list. Sorry, never buying an HP product. I don't care what it is. Never. I will go back to carving on stones with rocks before I will have to buy an HP printer. I'm sorry. And same with HP computers or anything else that company makes. I just won't. I won't. No, I won't. I'm very much like that with Facebook and Meta services. Unfortunately, I have to manage some of those for clients. But as far as personal stuff, nope, not on them. Not going to use them. Not going to have anything to do with them. We have to get to the point where advertising is not crammed in every little tiny corner of our life. This is why I love Linux. I'm not going to be bombarded with advertisements on every little element of Windows, which are cramming it now in their built-in weather application now. I mean, geez. So with that being said, there is serious problems to this. They should not have been installing this on people's computers who have opted out of experiments. They should not have turned on this data collection by default, even though technically it does help with their model to be, to blend into the crowd. Yes, maybe we do need to come up with some means where that is the possibility, but the complete lack of communication is a catastrophic failure in the trust of Mozilla. That being said, unfortunately, we need to keep Mozilla around because there are not a lot of other options. Going back, of course, to the original article, they do mention what we talked about Ladybird last week in the news. This is in an upcoming browser which is completely independent of Mozilla and Chrome. The problem we have right now is that we have Chromium handles about, is it like 80 or so % of the web browser market? Mozilla is almost the rest of it, with poor little Safari hitting that over the corner and a few other very, very small, obscure ones that may or may not actually work well. So I'm pleased to see something like Ladybird come around, and they also said here in the article that Servo, I guess, I'm not heard of Servo, but I guess that one's being revived as another alternative web engine, because if Mozilla and Google are the only options we have right now, we have a serious problem with the gateway to the internet itself, and that in and of itself is the issue. Again, though, I'll also go back and call out for Firefox to say, hey, why don't you make a slimmed down version of a web browser that is nothing but a very simple web browser with no ability to access sensors or anything else? That would also make me very happy. We have those on smartphones. It would be lovely to see one of those on a computer system as well. Let me know, though, if you guys have seen or heard about this thing. If you have Firefox 128, did you know it was here? And are you going to say, hey, I agree, let's go ahead and have more people in here and give more gray material in? Or you're like, I think I'm just going to opt out, thank you. Of course, if you're opting out, follow the article. It'll be linked down below. Follow Andrew Moore's article. Read his whole article so you understand it. And if you agree that you definitely don't want to be doing this, go ahead and change those DApp server settings in your About config. and that will solve the problem here as well. So that is my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down below. If you like this type of content, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Let me know your various thoughts, and leave us a like down there as well. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.